Hello, everybody. My name is Volker Friedrich. I'm the founder and managing partner of GBP International, a global consulting company based in Asia Pacific. And we are conducting a series of interviews with interesting personalities. And while we were having a talk with Peter Westerbecker the last time on physical infrastructure, today I have the pleasure to speak to Puvan, the CEO and founder of Bluenumber. It's a digital platform, and I would like to invite Puvan to explain to us a little bit how this technology and this platform is going to have an impact in the future. And before we dive into the Bluenumber details, I think it is an interesting starting point for discussion how technology will help us to get out of the COVID crisis. And there is no business, either for good or for bad, which is not affected by the disruptions caused by the COVID pandemic. And first of all, Puvan, great to meet you again here. And I understand you're in Munich now. So we are in the same country, at least, if not physically together. So how has COVID affected your businesses, your ventures, your network, and your operations in the last 1 year, 1.5 years, so to say?
Well, yeah, thank you, Volker, for inviting me on. I'm very happy to be able to share some of what's been happening to us over the last couple of years. I think obviously the COVID phenomenon has impacted almost every condition that we have come to rely upon. Whether it's economic or social, the way that we've understood globalization, the effects that has on each and every one of us. Suddenly, the COVID phenomenon has brought into stark relief how connected we actually all are, and maybe the prospect of going back to a situation where we are separated, where borders do keep us locked in. Is not a viable concept. I mean, we've come to realize this in the last 18 months or so. Now, for me personally, I suppose having spent the last 15 years of my life essentially 150 to 180 days away from wherever I'm based in terms of traveling, and since last March, not having traveled or gotten on a plane at all, it's been interesting to know how it is that we can conduct business, for example, like this, speaking over Zoom. It is what exactly is the necessity for face-to-face engagement, and what then is the value of that when we do finally get to meet. How do we then ensure that we can trust what it is that we see over digital networks, how it is that we conduct a business with contracts, smart contracts, and so on. So Bluenumber and the business that we are in, which is in digital identity, and also in terms of personal ownership and rights for data and property, data property, these discussions and the reality that's emerged over the last 18 months has actually made it much easier for us to explain what we do.
Yeah, I may interrupt a little bit here before we are going too deep, too early into the topic. And I'd like to bring back our viewers also to your career development, so to say. We know each other now for about 20 years or so. So by training and education, you're an architect. But I found one of your most interesting positions. You were one of the first chief sustainability officers in one of the large palm oil operations in Asia Pacific. And from there, you went on to the United Nations. You were an advocate, human rights, expert. You have been traveling the world on conferences and human rights and slavery. And that was the first origin or the trigger point, I would like to say, for you to develop this idea of Bluenumber. So maybe you can explain a little bit how Bluenumber started and how it developed after the, let's say, the trial period, I would like to call it.
So I like to, to say that, when people ask how long have you been doing, Bluenumber for, I think I've actually been, building Bluenumber for the last 20 years. It's just, waiting for the technologies and the whole kind of psychology to catch up with what I had envisaged in a particular way. I can't say that, I was so prescient to have imagined this, but certainly the ingredients of what Bluenumber is today has come from all of these experiences that you have mentioned. My work at Sime Darby was really, where I first started to institutionalize the idea of sustainability. This was now almost 12 years ago. And at that company, I had an opportunity to start to lay some foundations of what would become the metrics upon which you would base sustainability decision-making, risk management, risk definition. And at that point, we at Sime Darby, certainly, we didn't have tools to be able to gauge risk. The only way you could gauge sustainability risk was, potentially how much money would you lose if something happened, if the sea level rose by 1 meter and we lost so many estates that were, on the coastline.
Question about insurances at the end of the day.
Primarily, exactly. But already at that point, let's say, having practiced as an architect before I joined Sime Darby for already like 10 years, you begin to see that, the construct of a problem must be made up by the things that you are using to define the problem. I mean, you want to build a housing estate or a building. It actually comes down to every brick, every girder, every foundation. And if you're trying to understand a concept like sustainability, or at least promote it and then manage it, well, you need to look back to say, well, how are you measuring this? How are you using your KPIs for sustainability? And tools literally do not exist. At best case scenario, you are having reports that were being issued against some fairly arbitrary measures on environment or social good, CSR. Very difficult.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I had a little, let's say, period where I was lecturing at the university also about international ethics, and part of that lecture was the concept of United Nations Global Compact. I believe many companies are at least a little bit aware of what this concept is containing. And you also have been a partner of United Nations Global Compact in Malaysia at that time. And if I look at, let's say, sustainability reports of public listed companies, for instance, that is still kind of the name of the game, but many companies still struggle how to measure how sustainable are they actually in real fact. So is there any link or any, let's say, value add Bluenumber can propose to these companies to basically put a price tag or a measurement tag onto their products and services along the value chain?
So maybe if we take a step back, so Bluenumber really would be what I have now, now I suggest is the unit of measure, because it's a unit of identity. And it's an identity for a person or a place or an organization or a thing, which if you look at any part of our society or our economy, it's actually made up of these units. How many people are in a particular place doing a particular thing. And so you need to have this measure. When I was at at Sime Darby, obviously we measured everything in terms of product. How many cars we were putting on the road, how many houses we were building, how many tons of palm oil was going to the market. But behind every one of these units of product, there was a host of people, places, facilities, forests, various things, are behind these products that then allow for a claim to be made. When I left Sime and I moved to the UN, I actually had two hats. One is actually at the Global Compact in New York, where I was the head of food and agriculture. In Geneva, I was a special rapporteur for business and human rights. Now, what's interesting is that the UN is as siloed an organization as many multinational companies. They have departments. And even though I was moving between New York and Geneva, looking at these two different portfolios, the unit of analysis, once again, this problem of when you measure human rights and you are measuring the victims of human rights on a per victim basis, or the countries that are involved in the Human Rights Council and are imposing sanctions or are having wars and so forth. And then you go over to New York and you look at food and agriculture, and you look at supply chains where you have got people in them, the number of farmers who are in them, the number of consumers who are in them. But you never really talk about the people or the places that are impacted by these situations, the human rights situation or the food and ag situation. You look at the end of the day, in fact, even in the way that you have just phrased it, you want to have some assurance on the thing that you are buying, the product that you're getting, that says all of these problems have been taken care of. Mm. And I'm willing to pay a premium as a consequence because I see this label or I have this certificate that says that these problems are being taken care of. No human suffering is in this garment. But in reality, if you have no unit of measure of what constitutes a person who is in slavery, how can you design a label to put onto a product? And yet we see the labels everywhere. What does this tell us about our systems? And that's where Bluenumber steps in. That's really what we offer, this kind of ability to evidence a claim, but actually based on the unit of people, persons, places involved, and that feedback that comes back into the system.
I like the example. I mean, I have a young daughter. She likes to go shopping. She likes to buy products where you say made in China, made in Bangladesh or wherever. And she's very, let's say, aware of sustainability issues, CO2 footprint, etc., child labor, all these issues. How, and please explain that to, let's say, for a hypothetical 15-year-old girl listening to us now. How does Bluenumber help to understand what is behind, let's say, the T-shirt or the jeans, which is for sale in Europe anywhere?
So, I mean, I think anyone who's looking at a product must be able to ask certain questions about the product. And certainly, I think that your daughter and people who are after our generation, you know, are actually in a better position to evaluate more critically what should I know about this thing? Mm-hmm. And the reason why I say that is because you and I, you know, grew up in an era where we really had to trust what was on the label. You know, made in Japan was better than made in Hong Kong. You know, that was the kind of level that we could understand. Okay.
Speaking, yes.
Yeah, I mean, and in those days, I mean, you know, today, of course, but if I'm now, let's say, you know, someone who's grown up in the time where I have the internet, where I can do a Google search, where I can scan a QR code, where I can find out layers and layers and layers about things, that, if I'm interested in it, should be available to me. But if you find most products today, in fact, almost all products, you can scan up to a point to say, well, this product did in fact come from, you know, this place. Mm. But there is no reason why you would not be able to also ask all the workers who were on the factory floor at the time that that product was made, to add to that product to say, I was employed fairly, I was paid fairly, I was working good hours, I was not in an unsafe environment. The amount of additional information that is required to be parked behind that QR code could simply be a tap on a yes on a smartphone from one of those workers.
Yeah,
that's all.
Okay, understood. I mean, generally speaking, we see very often the let's say the headline, you know, the data is the new oil of the economy. Yeah, so we have all these buzzwords of big data, artificial intelligence, stuff like that. How is the Bluenumber concept fitting into this new ingredient for a new digital economy? And where is the business case for, let's say, Bluenumber itself, but also for potential customers of Bluenumber?
I very much like the data is the new oil analogy and saying, because like oil, it was those people who discovered oil first and exploited it as a market and sold it to the rest of us, that then became, you know, the robber barons that founded the oil-based fossil fuel economy. The difference between oil and data is that without having an oil field and having the capital to drill in it and exploit it, every single one of us is an oil field. So if we move into the oil is data,
Can you just repeat that? I think that has to digest,
okay.
Everybody individually is representing an oil field,
Yes. So when people say data is the new oil, what they mean, and the traditional, but when I say traditional, I mean the last 10 years, and we're seeing it playing out with Google and Facebook and so forth, is that they are the ones with the pipes that are drilling the field. The field is us. And what people don't quite, appreciate fully is that the reason why they can make all that money, they can tap into that wealth, into that oil, is our own work product. We are the ones who are generating the oil. We are literally creating the preferences, the choices, the consumer buying habits, the GPS tracking. We are the machine that is producing all of that oil.
Yeah. So this is the personal data identity, so to say, what we are talking about. And if we are
in a sense, yeah. So I'm not talking about health records. I'm not talking about data which you choose to keep private. Okay, let's take all of that off the table. Your bank records and so forth. Okay, that's your that's between you and your bank, or between you and your doctor. Okay, what I'm talking about is all the data that you are creating anyway, that is being sucked up by your phone or being listened to by Alexa, and is somehow sending information back to you based on your preferences and choices. And the decision that was made, in fact, by Apple, and the argument between Apple and Facebook just this last week about Facebook saying that they must have this tap into your oil field in order to be able to serve you better. It's the information that you generate that is not private, okay, but does not necessarily reveal something about you, but is hugely valuable. And that's what I mean when I say that, this is the data resource. Imagine that we are all born with this ability of productivity, which has never been the case in economic history before.
Right. And what you are saying basically is that people generally are, let's say, not informed enough, or don't have the tools or the concept yet that this oil we are carrying is worth some money. So absolutely, what you are proposing basically is to monetize let's say, the property rights about the personal data, which at the moment we are giving away for free, either voluntarily or involuntarily. And as you say, we are not talking about, let's say, private data security and data protection issues, which is a separate story. But you're saying we are carrying a monetizable value in us in terms of personal data. And with Bluenumber, we have one potential tool to convert that hot air, so to say, into real money. Is that true?
Precisely, that's exactly right. So Bluenumber, one use of it is to be able to confer, or at least to claim, a property right. You are saying that this is my identity, so it's a self-sovereign digital identity, blockchain secured, that allows for you to ring fence all of the activities that you do, and to say that this is mine now. I'm actually farming this field. As I farm this field, I'm generating a lot of data, soil data, activity data, also about my livelihood, the amount of water I use. Now, the interesting thing about this data is that it feeds into the claim that we were talking about before, about products. If I want to articulate that I am, growing an organic product, I need to have all of this data in order to be able to give that claim value, which means that that organic product can actually be broken down back into the constituents of, did I use proper fertilizer and so forth. But who owns that data? Today, that data actually has effectively a zero value to the person who's creating it, the farmer. Similarly, if you're a consumer and you are making a choice in a supermarket for an organic product, you are actually on the other side of the farmer. You are a valuable consumer that is stating an ethical preference that allows for FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods companies to tailor certain product lines to you. But you are not actually being paid for that. In fact, you are paying for it. And so this is where Bluenumber starts to redress that balance by saying that, look, you have a property right to the data that you create. And from that point on, there is a monetizable value, because property equals value.
Yeah. Well, if I put on my, let's say, my thinking cap, and if I look into the future of this concept, you have a pretty, I would say, disruptive concept at your hand. And so my first question is, why is it that nobody yet talks about Bluenumber in the magazines or in the blog channels where we talk about new disruptive technology? Or why are the private equities not lining up yet and make you a new unicorn? What is the biggest hurdle in order to roll out your concept to a larger customer base?
So, I mean, there are two aspects to what we've been doing. I mean, Bluenumber has been around since 2015. I started the organization first as a nonprofit immediately after I left the UN to start to build, the first iterations of the system. We've gone through a few stages where we needed to test some ideas. And at that point, we were always very generously funded by interested parties, pilot projects, a few key companies. And it's only in the last maybe 6 months or so with actually, with the tragic events of COVID that has allowed us to hone our thinking on what exactly is the value that we are delivering.
So COVID also forced you to really drill down and focus what the real value behind the Bluenumber idea is actually all about. Is that right?
Precisely, exactly. I mean, I think up until COVID dawned, when it became clear that there was so much of a focus on transparency in supply chains and so forth that we were working on. In fact, we were looking at the palm oil supply chain, we were looking at garment supply chains. But in reality, the ability to make a supply chain transparent is actually the proxy for the problem. Okay, the problem is not to make the supply chain transparent. The problem is, what does that reveal with regards to the communities that are behind those supply chains, the economies that are loss leading? For example, if we look at Bangladesh, how sustainable is an economy like Bangladesh if what they are doing is relying on 40% of their GDP exporting goods to countries which are underpaying for the livelihoods of their own people? It's that sort of discussion that has been coming up in the last year, and it's allowed us to really think about what is Bluenumber aiming to do with digital ID and so forth.
I mean, certainly it's a global issue, a global problem, and you are addressing that with Bluenumber, and it's I would say an uphill task, and you are really going up to the, let's say, the Mount Everest in inverted commas. If you close your eyes now, and if you are fast forwarding yourself 1 or 2 years from now, where do you most likely, or in all likelihood, see Bluenumber in, let's say, 1 or 2 years from now, if everything goes according to your plans?
So, I mean, I would think that I'm reluctant to frame, Bluenumber's projected trajectory in terms of being a unicorn or one of these other models that has relied generally upon, the exploitation of the digital asset, in this case, people. So if we look at unicorns that actually require people to give up data, or for data to be hoarded, and then for that to be monetized on behalf of the company. If you think about, every company that has got multi-billion-dollar valuations, it's primarily predicated upon the fact that they are stealing data of others and returning a questionable value to the data generator. So Bluenumber is not going to follow that trajectory. We are a 501c3 in New York State. That is a charitable organization, a nonprofit, and we are a public benefit corporation in Delaware, which means we actually have baked into our mission the idea of returning the value to our shareholders, to our Bluenumber entities, and so forth. So 2 years' time, I hope that we have millions of Bluenumber holders, all of whom are participating in a beneficial sense in our success.
Okay.
Right. So if we can return or generate, let's say, $10 per Bluenumber holder, if I'm someone in Bangladesh and I get an additional $10 in my credential wallet because I'm sharing data that I'm generating,
Yeah.
And I have 1 billion of those, then our value will be $10 billion.
Okay. Well, that sounds pretty fascinating. And let's go back a step apart from, let's say, the very desirable outcome in terms of doing good and being a charitable organization. Is there also some commercial value in terms of, let's say, hardcore businesses? Because I can imagine if you are connected to 10, 50 million people somewhere in a third world region, I'm thinking a lot in terms of market surveys, for instance. What type of services can you offer professionally to the B2B or the B2C consumer world?
So, I mean, that's exactly the type of service, which is a market, let's say, market verification or market credibility. I think in this case, what we need to do is to think about, the resolution of televisions. Over the last 10 years, we've gone from cathode ray tubes to now 4K, 5K, 8K TVs. And the question is, what you are seeing on the screen is a representation of the granularity that you can go down to. Now, up to a certain point, you are relying on third parties to filter and give you a report about what you are seeing. So you can say, we did a survey, the sample of the survey was this, and of course the sample is only a small size, so we're going to give you an interpretation in this report of what we think the sample means. Now, what Bluenumber does is to say, why would you do that and pay tens of thousands of dollars to essentially a qualified guess, when what you can do is pay tens of thousands of people $1 and ask them to just answer the question directly.
Okay, understood. Yeah, fascinating prospects, I would like to say. And we certainly are working together and cooperating wherever we can. We also have our fair share of experience, let's say, with the parts of the world where you are active. And for now, I'd like to thank you very much for explaining to us the Bluenumber concept. I think it's very unique in its way. I haven't seen anything else like it. With this, I'd like to close our interview for today. Thank you very much, Puvan. I hope to see you in person, and I hope to see Bluenumber thriving into a new unicorn and bringing goods and better services to the world and the data owners, so to say.
Thank you very much, Volker. My pleasure.
Thank you very much, Puvan. All the best. Bye-bye.